Is the washing of the feet. That's the gospel of today. And we celebrate the inauguration of the Eucharist, as we were talking about this morning. And it gives us the opportunity to reflect upon how we relate to the Eucharist, how it feeds us, how it is an intimate nutrient in our lives, perhaps, or not. And is there some way that we can deepen our intimacy with the Eucharist and appreciate it from an interior point of view more fully? It is a great gift to his followers and the gift of himself. So it's an opportunity for us to appreciate that gift and reflect on our own response to it. And I think this symbol of the washing of the feet is central to our understanding of the Eucharist. Jean Vanier has brought back the washing of the feet almost as he calls it, a forgotten sacrament of Christianity. It's I think the only time in the Gospel where Jesus very specifically says, "Do what I am doing, and do it as I am doing it to you." There's very specific teaching on imitation and participation in the sign that he gave. And yet, as with other things, of course, we have formalized it and made it very abstract, and the way it's usually done in the liturgy on Holy Thursday, which is the only time we do it formally, is, we have a few selected people, usually up on the altar, usually men, or it used to be only men. Now I think the Pope washes the feet of women as well. Today in Rome he'll be washing the feet of refugees, for whom he feels, of course, deep compassion. But even so, we've rather made it into something of an abstract symbol. But what we'll be doing this evening on Bere Island, maybe something that's a bit more difficult to do in St. Peter's in Rome, is to break into some small groups in the pews we're sitting in. So be flexible and use your initiative. So we'll form little small circles, and we'll have bowls and water for each circle, and we will wash each other's feet, as Jesus tells us to do. So we remove our shoes and socks, and one person begins, washes the feet of the person next to them, carefully and lovingly, attentively, both feet, and then dries them with a towel that will also be provided free of charge. And the water will be warmed, thanks to Anne, she's not here, but Anne Sullivan will be heating the water, so you won't have to scream when your foot touches the water. And then the person who has had their feet washed will bless the person who has washed their feet. And you can do that in any way. You can put your hands on their head or on their shoulder, or hold their hands and bless them or pray for them briefly. And then the person who's had their feet washed then turns to the person next to them and washes their feet in the same way. So it becomes a communal experience, and we'll all be doing that to each other in small groups. Now, why do we do it? And what is the theology? This is a kind of a lived theology. So in some ways it's best to do it, and the commentary is inherent in the doing of it. And when you do it, you'll experience what it means. But it's still maybe helpful to reflect on the meaning of it in terms of the gospel story that we are part of this week. So let's just read through the Gospel and reflect on it in the light of this forgotten sacrament. It was before the festival of the Passover, and Jesus knew that the hour had come for him to pass from this world to the Father. He had always loved those who were his in the world, but now he showed how perfect his love was. So, once again, in the tradition of John the Evangelist and his school, probably the person who wrote the letters of John was not the same person who wrote the Gospel, but there was clearly a school or community of the beloved disciple. John was seen to be the disciple Jesus loved. So out of this community comes a particular kind of theology or a particular emphasis upon love and upon what we have heard translated yesterday and today as perfect love. Yesterday, perfect love casts out fear. So what is perfect love? And this is a showing of that perfect love. And perfect love, wholehearted love. They were at supper, and the devil had already put it into the mind of Judas Iscariot, son of Simon, to betray him. So there's nothing sort of idealistic about this. This sign of perfect love is being shown at the moment of betrayal. So there's a very dark shadow running through this very bright light. And this is something that the Gospel teaches us, that the darkness is there, the shadow is there in our lives as it is at times in our own personality, but the light is stronger than the shadow. In fact, it's almost inevitable that there will be a shadow when the light is so strong. The stronger the light, the darker the shadow. And what is the shadow? The shadow is the result of the blocking of light. So whenever the light is blocked, a shadow is reflected. So I was walking down the road there, I think the day before yesterday, in the evening. It was a very beautiful golden light, and my shadow immediately in front of me, it might appear in Daily Wisdom one day, is half the length of the road, right in front of me. So the sun was low and strong, but casting its shadow. So I was blocking the light and casting my shadow. So shadows are an inevitable consequence of the light. So here's the shadow. But Jesus knew that the Father had put everything into his hands, and that he had come from God and was returning to God. So even in the knowledge of this betrayal and of his coming, passing from the world, Jesus is filled with knowledge. He knows who he is, where he is going, and he knows that everything he has come from the Father, and that he is returning to the Father. He knows himself. And his great desire is that we should know ourselves, that we also should know where we have come from and where we are going. It's his self-knowledge that is his authority, and that teaches us how to come to our own saving self-knowledge. Self-knowledge isn't something you can give to someone. You have to come to it yourself. And part of it is recognizing the shadow, not identifying with the shadow, but seeing it. But even more, turning towards the light. So self-knowledge is our responsibility, our work. But a teacher like Jesus shows us how and helps us to come to that self-knowledge that he has. So, filled with this knowledge, he gets up from the table, removes his outer garment. So liturgically, the priest takes off his one of his vestments, and taking a towel, wraps it round his waist. So you could imagine how surprised the disciples are at this. Maybe they've had a couple of glasses of wine and they don't quite know what's happening, but eventually they will begin to notice, because he pours water into a basin, as we will tonight. And it's always useful in a Zen-like way to focus upon something as immediate and physical and actual as a detail like that. You know, water flowing from a jug into a basin is pretty much the same thing now as it was 2,000 years ago. So, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel he was wearing. So when he came to Simon Peter, we don't know how many people were there in the room, but a good number, quite possibly. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" This is unacceptable behavior. You are not acting as you should. You don't have any dignity here. This is not good for the others to see you acting like this. And it's certainly not something I am prepared to put up with. So here is the outrage of the second in command telling the boss how they should behave. And where is Peter coming from? What is driving him to this refusal? And I think we can see here another shadow. There's the very dark shadow of Judas's betrayal, but remember, Peter is also the second big denier of Jesus in this story. So it isn't surprising that at the Last Supper, although Judas is actually thinking of how he can finish the job and betray him, Peter is in his own way blocking the light. So, and Jesus replies with great patience, as he quite often does to disciples who are in a blocked condition, like when Martha was acting out and acting badly. He was very patient with her. "Martha, Martha, you are fussing and worrying about so many things." Sometimes he is impatient with them, but when the person really seems to be in serious trouble, he is amazingly kind to them, in fact. So, "At the moment you do not know what I am doing, but later you will understand." So remember that Jesus is filled with his self-knowledge, his self-awareness. He knows where he's come from. He knows where he's going. He knows what's going to happen to him next. So he's filled with self-knowledge. And that is his authority. That's his calmness and peace as well. And he can see that Peter is demonstrably lacking in this knowledge. You don't understand what it is I'm doing, but you will later. But Peter, now, excuse me, blocking the light even more, never, says Peter. So you would have thought Peter, as a reasonable disciple, would have said, "Okay, wash my feet, if that's what you want to do." and I'll understand it later, but he absolutely refuses. So this is a very strong denial of Jesus and the authority of Jesus, the love of Jesus. So, never, you shall never wash my feet. Now, tonight, some of us, or some of the people in the church, may be very embarrassed about taking their shoes and socks off in an unusual environment. And you'll feel, or they might feel a little bit silly or embarrassed. But what is here is not just embarrassment, there's something deeper in Peter refusing this sign from Jesus. He doesn't understand the sign, and maybe he has an inkling of what it might mean, but he doesn't want to understand. He doesn't want to face it. So he's now pushed into this very strong denial of the person he says he is a disciple of, and that he will obey, and that he loves, and that he will be faithful to. So Jesus says, well, he doesn't say well, but he might have said, well, if I do not wash you, you can have nothing in common with me. Which is quite a statement. So if you don't allow this sign, and this is the importance of signs. This Eucharist itself is a sign. The Passover meal was a sign. And signs are important when they are symbols, when they are symbolic. They have the power to heal. Jung said that is the great effect of signs, of symbols, is that they bring healing when we enter into them, when we're touched by them. We were talking this morning about the Eucharist as a sacrament of healing, a symbolic ritual which touches us if we are open to it, and which brings healing. So this is a very powerful sign. Jesus is making it a break or make situation. It's a deal breaker. If Peter refuses to participate in this sign, then he is leaving the community. He's leaving any meaningful relationship with Jesus. He is making his own shadow stronger than the light. He's resisting and denying the very thing that he is claiming to love and serve and respect. So, not surprisingly, you might think about what is the tone, what is Jesus' tone of voice here? Is it threatening? Is it angry? Is it sad? Or is it just saying what he has to say? If I do not wash you, you have nothing in common with me. Then, Lord, said Simon Peter, not only my feet, but my hands and my head as well. Which is a typical remark that Peter comes out with from time to time when he doesn't understand things. He then jumps in with both feet and lands in the wrong place. But he's at least enthusiastic, isn't he? And he's trying, he's responding. And then Jesus says, no one who has taken a bath needs washing. So hope you will wash your feet tonight before you come to the church. No one who's taken a bath needs washing. He is clean all over. You too are clean, though not all of you are. He knew who was going to betray him, and that was why he said, though not all of you are. So we're reminded again at this dramatic moment of dialogue between Peter and Jesus of this shadow within the picture, this dark area of the scene. Because it's as if the relationship between Peter and Jesus is healed here. Peter still doesn't really understand, but at least he's trusting. What do we see here? He's trusting Jesus. He's saying, I don't really know what this sign means, but if you say so, okay, I will do it. And that is part of his healing, isn't it? So, but we're not allowed to forget that there is, even though the light here is stronger than Peter's shadow, Peter's denial, the shadow is still there. So, when he had washed their feet and put on his clothes again, he went back to the table. So he insisted on finishing the ritual, the sign. And then he says, do you understand what I have done to you? So understanding is very crucial to our spiritual growth. We need to become conscious, not just to go sleepwalking through the rituals or through the ideas of our faith, but actually to be awake, to know, to understand. Do you understand what I have done to you? You call me Master and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. So he hasn't forgotten who he is in relation to them. The act of washing their feet is actually a sign of his magisterial authority, of his teaching power, even though it looks as if, as it did to Peter, that this was a sign of weakness or an inappropriate sign of, somebody not handling their power or their authority or their position in the right way. So what we see here is a glimpse into a dynamic of relationship and of power and of what power means in a Christ-centered relationship. And it's a glimpse into the deep dynamic of the gospel itself. And it is a very clear insight into the meaning of what is going to happen tomorrow, where Jesus is on the point of being betrayed, handed over to the corrupt authorities who will have him destroyed, humiliated and destroyed. So this will look like total failure, and yet it is necessary. Yet it has a redemptive meaning and power. And so we're now going to go deep into the shadow, into the darkness that touches all human societies, all human power structures, that it's very difficult for us to get out of. And you find it in every human organization. You might think in a monastery or in a church, you wouldn't have this. You find it in big banks or in big institutions or in prisons. You'll find this dark power structure. But actually, it's present to some degree in all human societies, communities, and organizations. So, the glimpse we're given here in this very simple but shocking, challenging sign is something that goes to the heart of our human life and perception. If I then, your Lord and Master, have washed your feet, you should wash each other's feet. I've given you an example so that you may copy what I have done to you. So this is what Jean Bernier says. This is Jesus saying very specifically, you imitate me, you copy this. This is a very valuable sign. Now, it is part of the Eucharist, but it is something that we have left out of the Eucharist. It's a very graphic sign of peace, or kiss of peace, especially in, we don't ask you to do this evening, but especially I think in the Pope, I think, usually washes the feet of the people and then kisses their feet. So anyway, there's a very definite incarnational emphasis here upon the meaning of this little sacrament, the washing of the feet, that illuminates the meaning of the sacrament of the Eucharist itself. And the Eucharist is something that illuminates or sheds light on the basic structure of human relationship, how we relate to one another. And I suppose here Jesus is accepting that human organization and human relationships have a hierarchical structure. But, as maybe reality does, but he's saying here that hierarchy can be interpreted in a quite different way from the way we normally do. And if that hierarchy, that our human relationships are actually to mirror and reflect our relationship with God, to be true and loving, then the power game has to be undone. There has to be a renunciation of power and the gift of self, genuine gift of self, from one to the other. So you should wash each other's feet so that you don't get stuck in this hierarchical, exploitative system of human relationships. And then your community, your society, and the world, eventually, can be a place where there is no shadow, where there is only the light, because nothing is blocking it. There is no ego, no pride, no self-importance that will block it. So I think this is what we do this evening, and we just really have to be open to it. And if you're feeling a little bit embarrassed about it, just look at the altar servers this evening and see how much fun they're having.